The world of the early 20th century concealed, behind the grand facade of progress and civilization, a secret network of societies, lodges, and brotherhoods. In Parisian salons, Viennese basements, and Munich beer halls, people gathered, united by the search for esoteric knowledge and a special path for the development of humanity. Europe, barely recovered from the Great War, became a fertile ground for ideas that blended ancient myths with modern politics. Nowhere did this trend manifest as vividly as in defeated Germany. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, not only stripped Germans of territories and reparations, it dealt a devastating blow to national pride. In this atmosphere of humiliation and disappointment, many sought explanations for the catastrophe not in political or economic reasons, but in mystical forces. Germany, once the empire of Kaiser Wilhelm, had now transformed into the fragile Weimar Republic, where inflation reached astronomical proportions and social contradictions threatened new upheavals. It was on this fertile ground that organizations offering simple answers to complex questions flourished. Among them, the Thule Society occupied a special place. A secret order whose influence on the history of the 20th century proved disproportionate to its size. In 1918, when Germany was still reeling from revolutionary upheavals, Baron Rudolf von Sebottendorff founded an organization that would later change the course of world history. This man of unusual destiny, a former sailor who studied Sufi practices in Turkey and was an avid occultist, headed the Munich branch of the Germanenorden, a secret society established back in 1912. But soon, he transformed it into something more, the Thule Society, named after the mythical northern land. Thule was mentioned in ancient sources. The ancient Greek traveler Pytheas described it as the northernmost inhabited land, where the sun does not set during the summer solstice. For the Roman poet Virgil, it was Ultima Thule, the end of the world, the limit of human knowledge. Sebottendorff chose this name not by chance. For him and his followers, Thule symbolized the ancient ancestral homeland of the Aryan race, the source of its strength and wisdom. Officially, the Thule Society was registered as a sporting and intellectual society, which allowed it to avoid close scrutiny from the authorities. Its headquarters were located in the fashionable Four Seasons Hotel in the center of Munich. There, in luxurious interiors, people gathered, united by a belief in the special mission of the German nation and a hatred for Bolshevism, liberalism, and, especially, Jews. The society quickly attracted members of the aristocracy, intellectuals, industrialists, and military personnel. Among its members were figures such as the poet and playwright Dietrich Eckart, the architect Alfred Rosenberg, and the publisher Franz Eyre. The symbol of the society became a silver dagger against the background of a golden oak wreath framing a swastika. This ancient Indo-European symbol of the sun and well-being acquired a new meaning in the hands of Thule, a sign of the superiority of the Aryan race. The society's activities developed in two directions, internal and external. In a narrow circle of initiates, ancient runes and Germanic myths were studied, and rituals were performed, designed to establish a connection with ancestors and awaken the Aryan spirit. The external work, however, was aimed at political struggle in the chaos of post-war Germany. The ideology of the Thule Society was based on the concept of Aryan supremacy, a doctrine that combined pseudoscientific theories with ancient myths. Members of the society believed that the Germanic peoples were direct descendants of a superior race that once ruled the world and possessed secret knowledge. This race, according to their beliefs, originated from the legendary Hyperborea, a northern ancestral homeland where people lived in harmony with nature and wielded magical powers. Two Austrian mystics had an enormous influence on the formation of these ideas: Guido von List and Jörg Lanz von Liebenfels. Von List, who considered himself a seer and interpreter of ancient Germanic wisdom, developed the system of Armanism, an occult teaching based on runic knowledge. He claimed to have received revelations during temporary blindness after eye surgery in 1899. In his visions, he purportedly grasped the secret meaning of runes and ancient Germanic rituals. Jörg Lanz von Liebenfels went even further. A former Cistercian monk, he created the doctrine of theozoology, according to which Aryans were godlike beings, while all other races were the result of mixing with lower life forms. In his magazine Ostara, named after the Germanic goddess of spring, he promoted ideas of racial purity and eugenics long before the Nazis came to power. Members of the Thule Society synthesized these teachings, creating their own mystical worldview. They believed that the Germanic people possessed a special soul, the Volksseele, a collective spirit that connected all Aryans. This spirit manifested through blood, soil, and language. From this stemmed the cult of blood purity and the rejection of any mixing with non-Aryan elements. Particular importance was attached to the concept of eternal return, the cyclical nature of history. According to this theory, Aryan civilization had repeatedly reached the pinnacles of power, but then declined due to racial mixing. Now, Thule members believed it was time for a new revival of the Germanic spirit, a time of purification and a return to origins. An important element of the ideology was a particular understanding of history. The Thule Society rejected traditional historiography as Jewish science and created an alternative version of the past. In this version, ancient Germanic peoples appeared not as primitive tribes, but as bearers of a highly developed civilization that preceded Greece and Rome. Atlantis, Hyperborea, Thule, all these legendary lands were considered real dwelling places of the Aryan ancestors. Ancient runes and symbols became for the Thule Society not merely decorative elements, but a powerful tool of ideological influence. Members of the society believed that runic script contained an encoded message from ancestors, a magical power capable of awakening the Aryan spirit in the blood of Germans. Each symbol was viewed as a key to ancient knowledge, lost over centuries of Christianization and cultural mixing. A special place in this system was occupied by the swastika, the Hakenkreuz, as it was called in Germany. This ancient symbol, found in cultures from India to Scandinavia, was interpreted by Thule members as a sign of the eternal movement of the sun, Aryan vital force, and racial superiority. The clockwise rotating swastika symbolized creative energy, spiritual growth, and the triumph of light over darkness. In the society's rituals, it was often depicted within a circle, which enhanced its solar character and connection to the idea of eternal return. Alongside the swastika, other runic signs were also widely used. The sig rune, Sowilo, resembling lightning, was interpreted as a symbol of victory and strength. Two sig runes joined together later became the emblem of the SS. The Othala rune, signifying inherited property, transformed into a symbol of blood and soil, key concepts of Nazi ideology. The Tyr rune, named after the god of war, embodied martial spirit and readiness for self-sacrifice. Thule society rituals included runic meditations, during which participants visualized specific runes, striving to connect with their energy. Runic chanting, Galder, special vocal techniques designed to activate the magical power of symbols was also practiced. Society members believed that a correctly pronounced runic incantation could alter reality, influence the course of events, or even harm enemies. It is important to note that the interpretation of runes within the Thule society differed significantly from their historical meaning. Ancient Germanic symbols were reinterpreted and distorted to align with racial theory and political goals. For instance, the traditional meaning of the swastika as a symbol of well-being and fertility was replaced by the idea of racial purity and the struggle against, quote, zero, quote. This transformation of meanings vividly demonstrates the Thule society's method of working with cultural heritage: selective use of ancient elements, their reinterpretation, and inclusion in a new context. Runes transformed from a writing system into magical symbols, from archaeological artifacts into living tools of modern political struggle. Of particular interest is the so-called Black Sun, 12 sig runes radiating from a central circle like sunbeams. This symbol, later embedded in the mosaic floor of Wewelsburg Castle, the SS citadel, was interpreted as a source of Aryan power, hidden from the uninitiated. The Black Sun symbolized invisible light, accessible only to those with a special racial consciousness. In the mythology of the Thule society, a special place was occupied by the legend of Hyperborea, a mysterious northern land from which, they believed, the Aryan race originated. This mythical continent, located beyond the cold northern wind Boreas, was mentioned by ancient Greek authors. Herodotus and Pliny wrote about a blessed land of eternal light, where the sun rose and set only once a year, and the inhabitants possessed supernatural longevity and lived in harmony with nature. Members of the Thule society transformed these classical descriptions, imbuing them with racial content. In their interpretation, Hyperborea became the cradle of Aryan civilization, a place where all higher knowledge and technologies originated. They believed that Hyperboreans possessed incredible psychic abilities, allowing them to control natural forces, levitate, and communicate telepathically across vast distances. According to theories popular in Thule circles, ancient Hyperborea was located in the Arctic when it enjoyed a mild climate. A catastrophic shift of the Earth's axis, or another global cataclysm, led to the glaciation of this paradise, forcing the Aryans to migrate south. These migrations allegedly explained the emergence of highly developed civilizations in India, Persia, Greece, and Scandinavia. The Indian epic played a special role in the development of these ideas. Members of the Thule society enthusiastically studied the Vedas and Mahabharata, finding there mentions of the northern homeland of the Aryans and ancient technologies, interpreted as evidence of a highly developed Hyperborean civilization. Not limited to theoretical research, the Thule society initiated and supported expeditions in search of material evidence of Hyperborea's existence. Scandinavia, Iceland, Greenland, and the Arctic territories of the USSR were of particular interest. They sought ruins of ancient cities, megalithic structures, runic inscriptions, anything that could confirm their theories. In 1938 and 1939, influenced by these ideas, German expeditions to Tibet were organized under the leadership of Ernst Schaefer. Officially, the goal was to study the nature and ethnography of the region, but behind the scientific facade lay the search for traces of ancient Aryans, who allegedly migrated from Hyperborea to the Himalayas and preserved secret knowledge there. Members of the Thule society believed that restoring connection with Hyperborean roots would give the German people access to forgotten powers and technologies needed to create a new empire. They sought the so-called vril energy, a mystical force described in Edward Bulwer Lytton's novel The Coming Race, which the ancient Aryans allegedly possessed. Behind every great movement are specific individuals, and the Thule Society was no exception. Its creator, Baron Rudolf von Sebottendorff, was born in 1875 as Adam Alfred Rudolf Glaver to a locomotive engineer. His path to occultism began in Turkey, where he studied Sufism, alchemy, and Rosicrucianism. After adopting Turkish citizenship and a new name, he returned to Germany, convinced that he possessed the keys to ancient Aryan wisdom. It was Sebottendorff who combined traditional German nationalism with Eastern mysticism, creating a unique esoteric blend that became the foundation of Thule's ideology. Strikingly, the creator of the society that laid the groundwork for Nazism left Germany in 1934, disillusioned by how Hitler used his ideas. He died under mysterious circumstances in Turkey in 1945. Officially, he drowned in the Bosphorus. An equally significant figure was Dietrich Eckart, a poet, playwright, and journalist who became a spiritual mentor to the young Adolf Hitler. Eckart came from a wealthy Bavarian family, received a legal education, but dedicated himself to literature and occultism. His translation of Ibsen's Peer Gynt was considered a classic in Germany. However, Eckart's true passion was politics, imbued with mysticism. He believed that the German people were called to carry out a spiritual revolution, cleansing the world of, quote, 1. Eckart was the first to see in Hitler the, quote, 2 he dreamed of, and took him under his wing. It was he who introduced the future Führer to influential industrialists and aristocrats, opening his way to power. Before his death in 1923, Eckart uttered prophetic words. Alfred Rosenberg, a Baltic German born in Reval, modern Tallinn, brought a special intellectual contribution to the Thule Society. After receiving an architectural education, he became fascinated with racial theories and occultism. After the revolution in Russia, Rosenberg fled to Germany, bringing with him the infamous, quote, 4, a forgery that became the cornerstone of anti-Semitic propaganda. His main work, quote, 5, was an attempt to create a new religion of blood and soil, replacing Christianity. Rosenberg dreamed of reviving ancient Germanic paganism, cleansed of, quote, 6. Among other significant figures in the society were Karl Harrer, who co-founded the German Workers' Party with Anton Drexler, Hans Frank, the future Governor-General of occupied Poland, and Gottfried Feder, an economic theorist of early Nazism. All of them contributed their unique elements to Thule's ideology, forming a multifaceted doctrine that combined ancient myths with modern political ambitions. In early 1919, the Thule Society stood at a crossroads. To remain an esoteric circle engaged in the study of runes and the search for Aryan roots meant missing a historical moment. Germany seethed with revolutionary sentiments, and the Society's members understood the time had come to move from theories to action, from mysticism to politics. In January of the same year, Rudolf von Sebottendorff entrusted his confidants, Karl Harrer and Anton Drexler, with the task of creating a political wing for the society. Thus, the German Workers' Party, Deutsche Arbeiterpartei, DAP, was born, a modest organization destined to change the course of world history. The party's first meeting took place in the Munich beer hall, with only about 24 people present. It seemed that nothing portended a great future. However, beneath this political facade lay a carefully conceived plan. The Thule Society needed a tool to spread its ideas among the working class. aristocrats and intellectuals understood. Germany's future would be decided not in salons, but on the streets and in factories. The DAP's program was an astonishing synthesis of Thule's occult concepts and populist slogans. Mystical ideas about blood and soil, Aryan supremacy, and the fight against dark forces were translated into a language understandable to the common German. The party advocated for the unification of all Germans into a greater Germany, the abrogation of the Treaty of Versailles, the nationalization of industry, and the fight against interest slavery, a term that concealed traditional anti-Semitism. Particularly interesting was the mechanism for integrating esoteric ideas into the political program. The concept of Hyperborea transformed into the thesis of Germany's special historical path. Runic symbols became party attributes. The mystical superiority of the Aryan race became the justification for territorial claims. A fateful turning point occurred on September 25, 1919. Captain Karl Mayer, head of intelligence for the Munich military district, was sent to a party meeting at the, quote, 3 beer hall. He dispatched his agent, 30-year-old Corporal Adolf Hitler, there. Hitler was simply supposed to observe the meeting, but he couldn't restrain himself when one of the speakers began talking about the possible secession of Bavaria from Germany. Hitler's passionate speech made such an impression on Anton Drexler that he immediately invited the corporal to join the party. Soon, Hitler became DAP member number 555 and quickly rose to the role of chief orator. His talent for stirring the masses did not go unnoticed by the senior members of the Thule Society either. Adolf Hitler's relationship with the Thule Society remains one of the most controversial topics in the history of the Third Reich. Numerous myths have formed around this issue, often overshadowing historical reality. It is historically documented that Hitler was never an official member of the Thule Society. Unlike Rudolf Hess, Alfred Rosenberg, and other Nazi leaders, his name is absent from the organization's lists. However, this does not mean an absence of connections and influence. Dietrich Eckart became the key link between Hitler and Thule. This poet and occultist, one of the society's ideologues, first met Hitler in the autumn of 1919 and immediately recognized his potential as a leader. Their relationship quickly grew beyond a teacher-student format. Eckart not only introduced Hitler to influential Munich circles, but also shaped many aspects of his worldview. Under Eckart's guidance, Hitler studied the fundamentals of geopolitics, racial theories, and public speaking. Eckart instilled in his protege the idea that the German people must be saved by a leader with messianic qualities, and convinced Hitler that he was destined for this role. In his final notes, Eckart stated, "Follow Hitler. He will dance, but I wrote the music." Another channel of the Thule Society's influence on Hitler was Rudolf Hess, who became his personal secretary. Hess, a devoted member of the society, introduced the future Führer to the geopolitical theories of Karl Haushofer and the concepts of Lebensraum, which later formed the basis of Nazi foreign policy. It is important to note that Hitler was selective in his approach to Thule's occult ideas. He borrowed symbolism, rhetorical devices, and some concepts, but rejected excessive fascination with mysticism. For him, esoteric teachings were primarily a tool for mobilizing the masses, rather than an object of personal belief. After coming to power, Hitler distanced himself from the occult roots of Nazism. In 1941, he initiated Operation Ahnenerbe, aimed against astrologers, mediums, and esoteric societies. Many former Thule members were repressed or removed from power. This is explained not only by the desire to conceal the occult origins of the movement, but also by Hitler's pragmatic approach to ideology. The question of the influence of the Thule Society's ideas on the formation of Hitler's anti-Semitism deserves special attention. Historical evidence indicates that his Judeophobia formed during his time in Vienna, before he encountered Thule. However, it was within the society's circles that it acquired a cosmic character, transforming from a common prejudice into a worldview. In this system, Jews were presented not merely as an alien element, but as a force opposing the Aryan spirit on a metaphysical level. In the depths of the occult theories of the Thule Society, a special place was occupied by the so-called sacred geography, a system of ideas about the mystical significance of territories and borders. These concepts did not remain abstract ideas. They materialized into concrete geopolitical doctrines, which subsequently became the basis of the Third Reich's expansionist policy. A key role in the formation of these ideas was played by General Karl Haushofer, a military theorist, geographer, and geopolitician, closely connected with the Thule Society through his student Rudolf Hess. It was Haushofer who developed the concept of living space, Lebensraum, which became the cornerstone of Nazi foreign policy. According to this theory, a dynamically developing nation needs constant expansion of its territory to secure resources and space for growth. In the Thule Society's interpretation, this purely materialistic idea acquired a mystical nuance. Expansion to the east was seen not merely as land grabbing, but as a sacred return of the Aryans to their origins. On maps created in Thule circles, territories of future expansion were marked not just as potential colonies, but as lands having a special energetic connection with the Aryan race. These occult maps combined modern geographical data with ancient runes, astrological symbols, and mythological references. They were not merely planning tools, but magical artifacts intended to activate the blood memory of the German people. Special attention was paid to energy lines and points of power, allegedly connecting various parts of Eurasia. Members of the Thule Society believed that control over these points would give Germany not only a military, but also a metaphysical advantage. Many of these maps included territories that had never been within the sphere of German influence, but were linked in Thule mythology to ancient Aryan migrations. One of the most intriguing aspects of Thule's occult cartography was the concept of the Black Sun, an invisible astral body emitting a special energy, accessible only to the initiated. Some maps marked points where the influence of this mystical luminary was allegedly strongest. These places were considered ideal for the construction of ritual structures and the conduct of ceremonies. No less important was the idea of a hollow earth, popular in Thule circles. According to this theory, our planet is hollow inside, with an inner surface inhabited by a highly developed civilization. Some members of the society believed that the entrances to this inner world were located at the poles, and organized expeditions to search for them. This strange concept also found reflection in the cartographic works created in Thule circles. After the Nazis came to power, many of these esoteric ideas were integrated into the official geopolitics of the Third Reich. The concept of living space became the justification for aggression against Eastern neighbors, and mystical ideas about ancestral lands were used in propaganda to mobilize the masses. Even quite rational military strategists often turned to occult maps when planning operations, believing that they contained ancient wisdom inaccessible to conventional science. Heinrich Himmler, Reichsführer SS, and one of the most influential figures of the Third Reich, translated the esoteric ideas of the Thule Society into state policy through the establishment of the Ahnenerbe Research Institute. His fascination with occultism began long before the Nazis came to power. A scion of a Catholic family who received an agricultural education, Himmler showed an interest in Germanic mythology, runes, and theories of racial superiority from a young age. His personal library housed rare works on occultism, including those of the Thule Society's founders. He was particularly impressed by ideas about Hyperborea and an ancient Aryan civilization. In 1935, Himmler officially founded Ahnenerbe, Ancestral Heritage. Formally, it was a scientific organization studying the history and culture of Germanic peoples. In reality, however, the institute became a center for pseudo-scientific research designed to confirm Nazi racial theories. Under the umbrella of Ahnenerbe, archaeologists, anthropologists, linguists, historians, and occultists united, all working to create a scientific justification for the Aryan myth. The institute's structure included dozens of departments dealing with a wide variety of areas, from runology and folk medicine to geophysics and cave exploration. Funding was generous. Himmler spared no expense in his search for evidence of Aryan superiority. Ahnenerbe organized numerous archaeological expeditions throughout Europe. Excavations were conducted in Germany, Austria, Scandinavia, and the Balkans. Of particular interest were megalithic structures, ancient burial sites, and locations with runic inscriptions. Archaeologists received clear instructions: interpret any findings as evidence of a highly developed Aryan culture. If artifacts did not conform to this concept, they were either ignored or the data was falsified. The most famous was the Tibetan expedition led by zoologist Ernst Schaefer. Officially, the scientists went to study the nature and culture of Tibet, but the real goal was to find traces of ancient Aryans who allegedly migrated to the Himalayas from Hyperborea. The expedition collected a vast collection of Tibetan artifacts and conducted anthropological measurements of the local population, attempting to prove their connection to the Nordic race. Linguistic research played a special role in Ahnenerbe's activities. The Institute's scientists developed a theory that all Indo-European languages originated from an ancient Aryan proto-language. They attempted to reconstruct this language by studying runes, Sanskrit, and ancient Germanic dialects. Himmler believed that a revived proto-language would become a powerful magical tool. In addition to scientific research, Ahnenerbe also engaged in practical occultism. In Wewelsburg Castle, which Himmler transformed into a mystical SS center, rituals based on ancient Germanic cults were performed. Here, the esoteric symbolism of the Third Reich was also developed, from the SS runes to the Black Sun. Thus, ideas that originated in the Munich salons of the Thule Society turned into state policy, supported by the resources of a powerful totalitarian machine. The mystical search for Aryan roots went far beyond the scope of an esoteric circle, becoming part of the ideological apparatus that justified the most terrible crimes of the 20th century. The esoteric symbolism created within the Thule Society became the visual language of the Third Reich, transforming ancient signs into instruments of state propaganda. The most famous symbol borrowed from the Thule arsenal undoubtedly became the swastika, the Hakenkreuz. This ancient solar sign, found in cultures from India to Scandinavia, was reinterpreted as a symbol of the Aryan race and its continuous movement toward perfection. When Hitler chose an emblem for the Nazi Party in 1920, he settled precisely on the black swastika in a white circle on a red background, a combination already proposed in Thule circles. The black color symbolized race, white, the purity of ideas, red, the social program of the movement. Equally significant were the runes, integrated into the symbolism of various Third Reich organizations. The double Sig rune, lightning, chosen by Himmler for the SS emblem, embodied the energy of victory and the power of lightning, an attribute of the supreme god, Odin. The Othala rune, signifying hereditary possession, became the symbol of the SS race and settlement main office. The Tyr rune was used in the emblem of the Imperial Sports Badge and the Hitler Youth Schools. A special place in Nazi iconography was occupied by the Black Sun, 12 Sig runes radiating from a central circle. This symbol, laid in the mosaic floor of the Obergruppenführer Hall of Wewelsburg Castle, represented a source of hidden Aryan energy, invisible to the uninitiated. According to the beliefs of SS esoterics, the Black Sun emitted a special radiation, accessible only to those with pure Aryan blood. The rituals of the Third Reich also bore the imprint of the esoteric practices of the Thule Society. Torchlight processions, mass gatherings with precisely choreographed movements, the cult of fire and light, all this had roots in the occult ceremonies practiced in a narrow circle of initiates long before the Nazis came to power. The Nuremberg Party Congresses, with their grandiose lighting effects, the famous cathedrals of light created by anti-aircraft searchlights, embodied the idea of transforming chaos into cosmic order, a central concept of Thule's esoteric teaching. The architecture of the Third Reich also reflected occult influences. Albert Speer, Hitler's chief architect, designed monumental structures intended to evoke a sense of superhuman scale. Elements of ancient Germanic sacred geometry studied in the Thule Society could be traced within them. Particularly indicative were the plans for the reconstruction of Berlin into the world capital Germania, where the central element was to be the giant domed Volkshalle, a modern embodiment of the mythical Valhalla. Even the military uniform and insignia of the SS troops were developed with esoteric symbolism in mind. The black uniform, silver runes, special rings with a dead head and runes, all this transformed the members of the organization into a peculiar knightly order, heirs of ancient Germanic warrior brotherhoods. Thus, ancient symbols, reinterpreted in the circles of the Thule Society, became instruments for mass mobilization and the visual language of a totalitarian regime, transforming the esoteric concepts of a narrow circle of initiates into a state ideology that captivated the minds of millions. Wewelsburg Castle, nestled in the picturesque mountains of the Teutoburg Forest, became a true occult center of the Third Reich. Heinrich Himmler acquired this medieval structure in 1934 and invested enormous resources in its reconstruction. The castle's triangular shape, reminiscent of a spearhead, held special significance for the Reichsführer SS. He saw in it a mystical ship heading east towards lands that were to become part of the Aryan Empire. Wewelsburg's northern tower was transformed into an SS sanctuary. In its dungeon was the so-called Hall of the Dead, a circular room with 12 pedestals along the walls. Here, rituals were performed in honor of fallen high-ranking SS officers whose urns with ashes were placed in special niches. Above this hall was the Obergruppenhall, a ceremonial hall for the highest SS leadership. In its center was a circular mosaic depicting the Black Sun, a symbol combining 12 Sig runes into a single pattern, symbolizing the source of Aryan power. Around this symbol, Himmler planned to gather 12 top SS officers, a kind of Knights of the Round Table, New Teutons. Initiation rituals into the SS were a bizarre mixture of ancient Germanic rites, runic magic, and military ceremony. Recruits underwent a complex initiation procedure, including an oath on ancient Germanic artifacts, meditations on runes, and endurance tests. Special importance was given to blood purity. Each candidate had to prove the absence of non-Aryan ancestors before 1800. Higher SS ranks underwent additional rituals in Wewelsburg. These included night vigils in special crypts, meditations on runes, and the study of ancient texts. Himmler believed that these practices awakened the genetic memory of Aryan blood and connected modern Germans with their ancient ancestors. Seasonal festivities, timed to solstices and equinoxes, held a special place in SS occult practice. The summer solstice, June 21st, was considered the main holiday of the Aryan calendar. On this night, ritual bonfires were lit on hills throughout Germany, around which ceremonies dating back to ancient Germanic fertility cults were performed. Himmler attached great importance to SS marriage rituals. Officers could marry only with his personal permission after a thorough check of the bride's ancestry. The wedding ceremony included elements of pagan rites, the exchange of runes, oaths on a sword, and special incantations designed to ensure the birth of pure-blooded offspring. By the early 1930s, the original Thule Society as an organization had virtually ceased to exist. Its founder, Rudolf von Sebottendorff, disillusioned by how his ideas were used by the Nazis, left Germany in 1934. He moved to Turkey, where he continued to pursue occult studies away from political storms. Coincidentally, on the day of Germany's surrender, May 9, 1945, Sebottendorff was found dead in the waters of the Bosphorus. Officially, it is believed he committed suicide, although the circumstances of his death remain a mystery. Other key figures of the Thule Society met varying fates. Dietrich Eckart, Hitler's spiritual mentor, died as early as 1923 without seeing the triumph of the movement he helped create. Alfred Rosenberg made a dizzying career, becoming the chief ideologist of the Nazi Party and minister of the occupied Eastern Territories. His work, The Myth of the 20th Century, became the second most important book of the Third Reich after Mein Kampf. At the end of the war, Rosenberg was captured by the Allies and hanged by sentence of the Nuremberg Tribunal. Although the Thule Society formally ceased to exist, its ideas deeply permeated the ideology of the Third Reich. A peculiar metamorphosis occurred. The esoteric concepts of a narrow circle of initiates transformed into a state doctrine that encompassed an entire country. At the same time, open occultism was gradually pushed out of the public sphere, giving way to more pragmatic political formulations. Upon coming to power, Hitler began to distance himself from his occult roots. For him, the mystical ideas of the Thule Society were primarily a tool, not a matter of personal faith. He understood that governing a modern state required not runes and rituals, but effective bureaucracy and military power. In 1941, he even sanctioned an operation against astrologers and occult groups, many of whom had connections to the early Nazi movement. However, other Nazi leaders, especially Heinrich Himmler, remained loyal to the esoteric ideas of Thule. Under his leadership, the SS transformed into a peculiar order, combining modern military organization with elements of ancient Germanic cults. The Ahnenerbe Institute continued its search for Aryan roots, organizing expeditions and research around the world. Paradoxically, as the power of the Third Reich grew, its occult component increasingly receded into the shadows. The public image of the Nazi state was formed as that of a modern, technologically advanced power, not a mystical brotherhood. the swastika transformed from an esoteric symbol into an ordinary state emblem. Runes became merely elements of military and party symbolism, losing their sacred meaning for most Germans. The Thule Society's ideas about the racial superiority of Aryans, the necessity of expanding living space, and the struggle against dark forces were translated into the language of political slogans and state programs. Occult cartography transformed into concrete plans for military expansion. The mystical searches for Hyperborea gave way to tank wedges breaking through to the Volga and the Caucasus. After the end of the Second World War, the Thule Society and its role in the rise of Nazism became the subject of intense academic debate and speculation. The first post-war studies, conducted by Allied specialists, focused on the practical aspects of Nazi ideology and propaganda mechanisms, almost entirely neglecting their occult roots. This tendency was explained by the desire to present Nazism as a rational, albeit criminal, political movement, rather than as a manifestation of irrational mystical forces. In the 1950s and 1960s, the academic community adhered predominantly to a materialist approach to the history of the Third Reich. Historians of the Marxist school interpreted Nazism exclusively as a tool of monopolistic capital, completely ignoring the esoteric component. Western researchers, while acknowledging the existence of the Thule Society, considered it merely an insignificant episode in the history of early Nazism. A turning point came with the publication in 1960 of Louis Pauwels and Jacques Bergier's book, The Morning of the Magicians. This work, balancing on the edge of scientific research and sensational journalism, for the first time broadly presented the thesis that Nazism was not just a political movement, but a magical order based on ancient occult practices. The authors claimed that Hitler and his inner circle were initiated into the secret knowledge of the Thule Society and used it to manipulate mass consciousness. The book caused a real sensation and spawned a wave of popular literature about the occult roots of Nazism. The 1970s and 1980s became a period of polarization of opinions in academic circles. Conservative historians rejected any mention of esoteric influences on Nazi ideology as unserious speculation. At the same time, a school of researchers emerged that viewed Nazism through the prism of the history of religions and mystical movements. Nicholas Goodrich Clark, in his fundamental work, The Occult Roots of Nazism, conducted a thorough analysis of the connections between early 20th century Ariosophy and the ideology of National Socialism, convincingly showing how mystical concepts transformed into political doctrines. Modern research offers a more nuanced approach to evaluating the role of the Thule Society. Most serious historians acknowledge the influence of esoteric ideas on the formation of Nazi ideology, but emphasize that this influence was not uniform and all-encompassing. Different Nazi leaders had different attitudes towards occultism. While Himmler was genuinely fascinated by runic magic and Aryan myths, Hitler used esoteric symbolism primarily as a propaganda tool. The discussion about the extent of the influence of esoteric teachings on the real policies of the Third Reich continues today. Some researchers believe that occult ideas were merely a decorative element, masking a banal lust for power and territorial expansion. Others point out that many military and political decisions of the Nazi leadership cannot be explained by rational considerations and could have been dictated by mystical beliefs. The history of the Thule Society and its influence on the formation of the Third Reich is not merely an academic question. It is a warning about how esoteric ideas can transform into a deadly ideology when they find a favorable socio-political environment. By studying the mechanisms through which mystical concepts were converted into state policy, we gain a key to understanding the nature of totalitarianism in general. The Thule Society demonstrated how effectively mass consciousness can be manipulated by appealing to ancient myths and creating a new mythology based on pseudo-scientific concepts. They found the ideal formula: to combine rational discontent with the existing order with an irrational belief in a mystical destiny. This technique has not lost its relevance even today. In the modern world, we observe alarming parallels with the era of Nazism's genesis. Economic crises, social instability, and the search for simple answers to complex questions. All these create fertile ground for new forms of political esotericism. Under various names, ideas of racial or cultural superiority, the search for ancient roots, and the special mission of a chosen people are being revived. As 100 years ago, these concepts are clothed in pseudoscientific forms, utilizing the terminology of genetics, anthropology, or cultural studies. The combination of political ambitions with an appeal to mystical experience becomes especially dangerous. When a political leader positions himself as a conduit for higher powers or a guardian of ancient wisdom, this should immediately raise alarm bells. The history of the Thule Society shows how quickly such rhetoric can move from harmless esoteric speculations to justifying mass violence. Critical thinking and historical awareness become the main defense against such manipulations. The ability to recognize familiar patterns in new guises is a key skill for countering modern forms of totalitarian propaganda. It is important to remember that the most dangerous ideologies rarely present themselves as evil. They come disguised as high ideals, promises of revival, and appeals to a glorious past. The Thule Society did not call itself a villainous organization. It positioned itself as a guardian of ancient wisdom and a protector of national values. Only by studying the mechanisms of transformation of these seemingly noble goals into instruments of mass destruction can we hope to prevent the recurrence of similar tragedies. The lesson of the Thule Society is that there are no harmless forms of hatred. Any ideology based on the superiority of one group over others contains the seeds of violence that will germinate under favorable conditions. The mystical shell only enhances the danger, giving earthly ambitions an aura of cosmic inevitability and divine sanction. The memory of how an esoteric circle in a Munich beer hall transformed into a force that changed the course of world history should serve as an eternal reminder of the fragility of civilization and everyone's responsibility for preserving humanist values.